Well, continuing, so there are other ions who also play roles during the action potential. Now, when you talk about this, uh, that means that we have to consider different ions, including calcium, and then there are so many other anions also. But for now, let's focus on calcium. Now, what happens is that every membrane in the body it has a calcium pump, right? We already established that in previous videos. Now, calcium pump works similar to sodium pump. What it does is basically pumping out calcium from inside the cell to the outside. So it basically pumps out the calcium. So this means that inside has no calcium anymore. I mean, it does have, but it's very less in quantity, right? It basically pumps out calcium. So this is calcium pump's job, right? Now, when there's a lot of calcium outside, so calcium extracellularly is very high. This is established. We already know this also. Now, this is calcium pump, but right now our main focus should be voltage gated calcium channels. Now, gated calcium channels, what do? They respond to the electrical potential, yes, and the other thing, the other channels, so they will aid the diffusion. So from outside to inside, the calcium will be diffused from outside to inside. So when calcium diffuses from outside to inside, what happens is that it makes the sodium channels also permeable. Other than that, it also brings along with it sodium. So this is how you can learn it. It also brings sodium along with it. It drags it, and then it also makes the sodium channels permeable. Because of this, depolarization occurs. So another ion which plays a role in action potential is calcium. That voltage gated calcium channels, when it's carrying in the calcium, it also carries in sodium, and therefore it contributes to the depolarizing phase. So this is a very major function of the voltage gated calcium channel. It causes depolarization. So what is the difference between sodium channel and calcium channel? Now, sodium channel is fast acting. It's very fast. Calcium channel is very slow channel. Sodium channel, it's going to initiate the action potential no matter what. But calcium channel, it's going to sustain the depolarization because this is a very slow channel. It's really slow to close as well. So it's going to sustain the depolarization. And whenever you see action potential, right? For example, this is the action potential graph. Action potential will be sustained and then it will go to hyperpolarization and then it will reach the resting membrane potential. So this plateau, it's caused by, in a lot of cases, by your calcium ions, right? And also it's caused because of the slow opening of your potassium channels, because potassium channels are slow to open, so therefore it delays the efflux, therefore uh, repolarization is delayed and hence the plateau. And also very important thing, calcium causes this plateau also because it's slow to close, so therefore it causes a sustained depolarization. Now, calcium channels, they're abundant in cardiac and smooth muscles, so they play a very important role there for sustained depolarization. And when very important piece of information, that there are a lot of smooth muscles that do not have, they do have sodium channels, but very few in number. So in those smooth muscles, calcium channels play a very important role in producing action potential. Now, in a few cases where the body is suffering from hypocalcemia, which is a deficiency of your calcium, right? Deficiency of calcium basically increases the permeability of sodium channels. Because there is deficiency, sodium channels will become more permeable. You have to learn this as it is, and this activates the sodium channels. It makes the cell very excitable. So even if there is a small increase in membrane potential, you do not have to reach the minus 55 millivolt. For example, this is your resting membrane potential, right? Even if it comes at minus 65 millivolt, even the small increase in membrane potential is enough to cause the depolarization. So it makes the cell highly excitable, and this causes muscle tetany. So if they ask you about muscle tetany, when does it occur? It occurs in the cases of hypocalcemia, whenever there is very little amount of calcium. So muscles stay contracted because they're being stimulated too fast or because calcium is too low, uh, making us too excitable. In hypocalcemia, too low blood calcium, calcium normally stabilizes the voltage-gated sodium channels on nerve membranes. Low calcium, sodium channels become overactive. Neurons and muscles are hyperexcitable. This causes spontaneous, repetitive muscle contraction called tetany. Now, this is the thing. It can also be pathologic. It can also not muscle tetany. Muscle tetany is always pathologic, but I'm talking about calcium channels, right? That excitability. It can also be pathologic. It can also be physiologic. So if, for example, any cell is hyper, uh, like it's very excitable, So that can be physiologic as well, but if the calcium is low, then we can easily classify it as being pathological. So tetany definitely is pathological. Now threshold value is minus 55 millivolts. If minus 55 millivolts is achieved, then only it will progress into a action potential. If not, then the action potential will die out and it will continue as resting membrane potential. So minus 55 value has to be achieved. So acute subthreshold potentials are what? For example, this potential that was unable, this is a local potential change that fails to elicit action potential. It was unable to cause action potential. So it will be an acute subthreshold potential. Now moving on, very important this chart. Let's just get done with this and then we're done. So here, this is the depolarization because of sodium influx, because of a potassium efflux, and then hyperpolarization. Why does hyperpolarization happen? It happens when there is, for example, I told you inactive inactivating gate of your potassium channel, right? When the okay, wait, never mind, what am I saying? Potassium channel. Okay, let's just talk about potassium channel. When your potassium channels, I told you they're slow to open, right? And then they're also slow to, because they're slow to open, you'll have a plateau. Because they're slow to close, so there'll be a lot of efflux and it will keep on falling to even more negative because a lot of potassium is effluxing. So because of a lot of potassium efflux, this will fall even to greater amount of negativity, and then that's hyperpolarization, right? So hyperpolarization here. Uh, During action potential, potassium channels open to repolarize the cell. After depolarization, when sodium rushes in, the cell must get back to its resting negative charges. So voltage created potassium channels open, letting potassium ions leave the channel, leave the cell. The outflow of potassium brings the membrane potential back down. This is repolarization, but the potassium channels are slow to close. They don't shut immediately when the resting potential is reached. They remain open a bit longer. Extra potassium leaves the cell. As a result, inside becomes more negative than normal. For example, it will become minus 80 or minus 90. This is hyperpolarization. So sodium potassium pump is going to restore the balance, right? So this is hyperpolarization, that because the sodium channels are slow to open, so that's plateau, but they're also slow to close. Therefore, there'll be greater efflux of potassium. So because there's greater efflux of potassium, a lot of potassium will be lost and increased negativity inside. So instead of minus 70, it will also go to minus 90 or minus 80, which is like a lot more negative than the normal resting membrane potential. So that's hyperpolarization. Now, another very important concept, yeah, here, this right here. So you have two types of refractory period. One is absolute refractory period and one is relative refractory period. Now here you can see that this is absolute refractory period, the ascending limb and the one third of the descending limb, right? And the rest of the descending limb and the entire rest period, that's the um, relative refractory period. So this is absolute. A comes first and R comes later. So absolute refractory period. It's a period of time during which a second action potential cannot occur no matter how strong the stimulus is. So no matter how strong the stimulus is, a second action potential won't be generated. Why? Because I told you that sodium channel, for example, if this is a sodium channel, it had an activation gate and it also had an inactivation gate, right? It also had an inactivation gate. So your inactivation gate, once it's closed, it needs to ensure that the entire, for example, this will close, right? When it gets any impulse. So once it closes, it will ensure that entire cell has reached RMP, then only it will open, and then only there will be um, influx of sodium. So inactivation of sodium channels, the inner gate is closed and can't open for some time. So we're talking about the inner gate, which is the inactivation gate. And this is your relative refractory period, which is a period of time during which a second action potential can only occur with a stronger than normal stimulus. So sodium channels return to the resting state and can be activated. So yeah, that's about it. And last thing is about the stabilizers and local anesthetics. So stabilizer. I told you previously that if you have hypocalcemia, sodium becomes more permeable, the cell becomes more excitable, tetany, right? And the opposite of that is stabilizer, in which there is lower excitability. So if there's hypercalcemia, if there's more calcium, less permeability of sodium, hence there'll be lesser excitability. So the same thing happens in local anesthetics, procaine and tetracaine, uh, which block the Activation gates of sodium channels. Sodium channels activation gates are blocked, so there will be no influx of sodium. So there will be no excitability. So that blocks the pain also.